I thought Buster was just mad we didn't give him a slice of the cake, but then he lunged at it like it was a bomb. That's what I told the 911 dispatcher when they asked me to describe the emergency. Of course, back then, none of us had any idea how serious things were. It was just supposed to be a cheerful Sunday afternoon. Blue balloons danced in the breeze, folding chairs circled up on the lawn, and kids ran around with frosting on their fingers. It was my nephew Carter's 6th birthday, and every single detail had been planned to perfection, except for the part where my German shepherd started howling like the world was ending. Buster wasn't the kind of dog to make a scene. He was old, big, and mostly liked to lie in the shade chewing on tennis balls. But the moment my sister-in-law, Denise, set the birthday cake on the table, Buster stood up, let out a low growl, and started barking non-stop. He moved toward the table, fur on his back raised. I thought maybe it was the smell of the cake or the candles, but when Carter ran up excitedly, Buster jumped in front of him and howled so loud everyone froze. "It's okay, buddy," I said, hurrying over. "It's just a cake." But Buster wouldn't stop. Then, without warning, he lunged up and knocked the cake clean off the table. I swear, time stopped. Carter gasped. Denise yelled. My brother Jack jumped up like someone had lit a fire under his chair. The kids squealed and scattered. The cake hit the grass upside down. And that's when I saw it. Something shiny, tucked inside the middle. I leaned in closer. It was a small metal cylinder, no bigger than my thumb. I had no idea what it was, but it didn't belong in any cake. Jack crouched beside me and poked at it with a plastic fork. "Don't touch it," I snapped. "It could be, I don't know, dangerous." We looked at each other. Buster sat beside us, still growling. I called 911. "Hi, I think there might be something weird inside a birthday cake. My dog went ballistic and knocked it over, and we found a metal thing inside it." The dispatcher was calm, but asked a lot of questions. She told us not to touch it, and said someone from the fire department would be right over. By then, the kids had been herded inside, and the parents looked a mix of confused and panicked. Denise was near tears. "I ordered that cake from the bakery down on Main," she kept saying. "It was supposed to be just vanilla with blue frosting." It felt surreal, sitting in the middle of a birthday party waiting for emergency services over a cake. But Buster sat there like a statue, eyes locked on the toppled dessert. When the fire truck rolled up, everyone stepped back. 2 guys in uniforms came over, one with gloves, the other with a metal box. They crouched by the cake and inspected the object. "Looks like a tracking device," one of them said. Everyone started talking at once. "Tracking? Like for a phone? For what? Who would put that in a cake?" The officer looked at me. "You said your dog alerted you to this?" "Yeah, he wouldn't stop barking. He practically tackled the cake." "Smart dog." Denise looked like she might pass out. Jack helped her sit down. A few of the other parents whispered among themselves, clearly debating whether it was safe to stay, or if they should just leave and pretend this never happened. But I couldn't stop staring at Buster. He was calm now, but alert, like he knew something we didn't. Over the next hour, we gave statements. The bakery was called. The manager insisted there was no way something like that could have ended up in a cake they made. The fire crew took the device and said they'd pass it along to local police. But the birthday party was over. The chairs sat empty, party hats abandoned on the grass. Carter sat inside with a juice box, confused why no one was singing happy birthday. I sat on the porch with Buster. I gave his ears a scratch. "Good boy," I whispered. Jack came out and sat beside me. "You think that thing was really dangerous?" "I don't know," I said. "But Buster thought it was, and that's enough for me." Over the next few days, everything turned into a whirlwind. The police showed up again. Turns out the cake hadn't come from the bakery after all. The manager double-checked their records and said there was no pickup under Denise's name. That led to Denise checking her texts. She went pale. I think I clicked a link online that sent me to a site that looked like the bakery, she said. It looked real. They even had a phone number and everything. But it wasn't. The order confirmation, the invoice, it was all fake. She'd paid with her card, and the cake had been delivered early that morning while Jack was out. She hadn't even questioned it. Someone had faked the whole thing. The news sent a chill through our neighborhood. People started talking about porch thefts and strange vans. Denise gave her statement to the police. Meanwhile, I kept thinking about Buster. How did he know? What did he smell? Or was it something else? One afternoon, I brought him to the vet. Not for anything medical, just to talk. Dr. Clara Baker had known Buster for years. She leaned down to check his eyes and gave him a treat. "He seems fine to me," she said. Could he really have sensed something?" She smiled. "Dogs have instincts we can't always explain. Some can detect seizures before they happen. Some sniff out low blood sugar. Maybe Buster smelled something off, or maybe he just felt something wasn't right. Either way, sounds like he saved the day." I nodded. "He's not just a dog," I said. "He's family." Buster looked up at me with those steady eyes, then let out a soft huff and rested his head on my foot. We walked home slowly. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm glow over the quiet houses. Kids were back out playing. Life was moving on. But for me, something had shifted. Buster had changed the way I thought about things. I started noticing more. I paid attention. Locked my doors earlier, kept my eyes open, and every now and then, when I caught Buster sitting at the window, ears perked up and eyes sharp, I wondered what else he saw that I didn't. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was coming next, we'd face it together. And I had a feeling the story was just beginning. A week after the party, Buster wouldn't go near the backyard. I tried everything, his favorite ball, a bowl of chicken, even calling him with that goofy high voice I knew he couldn't resist. But every time we got close to the spot where the cake had landed, Buster would freeze, tail stiff, and let out a deep, uneasy growl. It was like something in the air just didn't sit right with him. I started wondering if there was more to that cake than we thought. The police still hadn't updated us with anything substantial. They took the device, filed a report, and promised to get back once they had more. In the meantime, Denise had canceled all her cards, filed a fraud complaint, and bought a set of motion sensor cameras for the house. Jack installed them himself, muttering the whole time about how nothing felt safe anymore. I couldn't blame him. Even Carter, who usually bounced back like a rubber ball, hadn't asked for another cake. Not even a cupcake. He just said, "Buster saved my birthday," and that was that. One afternoon, I decided to visit the bakery myself. Main Street wasn't far, and I figured maybe seeing the place would help clear my mind. Maybe there'd been some weird misunderstanding. Maybe someone had picked up the wrong cake. The shop was bright and smelled like heaven. Warm sugar and vanilla and cinnamon. A girl in her 20s stood behind the counter, smiling politely. "Hi, welcome to Frosty's," she chirped. "What can I get you today?" I cleared my throat. "Actually, I had a question. Do you guys keep records of orders? Like cakes that were supposed to be picked up last Sunday?" Her smile wavered just a bit. "I think so. Let me check." She disappeared into the back. A minute later, a man with salt and pepper hair and flour on his apron came out. "I'm Ted. I own the place," he said. You're asking about a cake from Sunday? I explained what happened, how my sister-in-law thought she ordered from here, but apparently didn't. Ted frowned. We had no Carter on our list. I double-checked myself when the police called, but I remember something strange. We had a guy come in that morning, said he was picking up a cake for a friend, gave a generic name, Mark, I think, but the cake didn't have a name on it, and he didn't match any of our orders. Said he was in a rush, paid cash, and left. I leaned in. What did he look like? Tall, shaved head, wore sunglasses even indoors. Didn't talk much. Something about that description made my stomach knot. Ted shook his head. It bothered me, but the guy didn't do anything wrong. Paid full price, even tipped. So I let it go. Back in the car, I sat with the engine running, staring out the windshield. If the guy didn't order online and didn't use Denise's fake website, then where did that cake come from? And more importantly, why? When I got home, Buster met me at the door with his usual half-bark, half-grumble. I scratched his back and told him about Ted's mystery man. He sniffed at my pants like he was trying to gather clues himself. Later that night, I watched the footage from the new security cameras with Jack. One of them caught a glimpse of the delivery, a white sedan pulling up early that morning. A man stepped out, box in hand. He walked fast, looked down, wore a hat pulled low. Can you zoom in? I asked. Jack did, but the footage was too grainy. Still, something about the guy felt familiar. Not in a personal way. More like a vibe. He didn't act like someone doing a simple drop-off. He looked around too much. Moved too quickly. I don't like this, Jack muttered. Me neither. The next day, I took Buster for a walk in the park, trying to shake the sense of unease that clung to me. The sun was out, birds chirping, kids playing tag near the playground. Normal life carried on. But Buster kept pulling at the leash, ears twitching, eyes alert. When we passed a trash bin near the picnic tables, he stopped dead. Then he began to bark. Short, sharp bursts. Not the same howl as the birthday incident, but close. I peeked inside. It was full of wrappers, soda cans, napkins, and a small, crumpled bakery box. Not Frosty's. A generic box with a faint logo I couldn't quite make out. I fished it out, careful not to touch it more than necessary. The logo read, Sweet Drop Confections. I'd never heard of it. Back home, I went online and searched the name. Nothing. No website, no location. Not even a review. Just one dead link and a cached page that led nowhere. Fake bakery. Fake cake. Real consequences. I called the detective handling our case and told him about it. He asked for photos and said they'd follow up, but I could tell by his tone he didn't think it was a big lead. So I did my own digging. I drove downtown and asked around. No one had heard of Sweet Drop. I checked strip malls, kiosks, pop-ups. Nothing. That night, while Buster curled up on the couch, I stared at the ceiling. Something was wrong, and I felt like we were missing a bigger piece of the puzzle. Then the knock came. It was nearly midnight. Jack and Denise were asleep. I looked through the peephole. A man stood there, face in shadow. Who is it? He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. I opened the door a crack and watched him head down the sidewalk, disappear around the corner. Buster growled softly behind me. The next morning, the mailbox was open. Inside was an envelope, no address, no name, just one photograph. It was a picture of Buster, taken from across the street. I didn't go to work that day. I called the detective again. He came to the house and looked over the photo, said it was probably intimidation, told me not to panic, but his eyes lingered a little too long on the image. That afternoon, Jack installed another set of cameras, higher resolution, and a new lock on the back gate. Denise cried. Carter clung to Buster like he was a lifeline. We still didn't know who the man was, or what he wanted. But we knew one thing. Buster had seen him first. And he was the reason Carter was safe. So when I got the idea, maybe crazy, maybe brilliant, I didn't hesitate. I took Buster to the sheriff's office. "Can a dog help identify a person?" I asked. The deputy raised a brow. "You mean like a K-9 lineup?" "No, I mean, he reacted to this guy. Could he maybe recognize his scent again? Or a place where he's been?" The deputy didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "Let me get someone." They brought out Officer Strickland, the K-9 handler. He watched Buster for a minute, then nodded. "Might work. If he's got a strong reaction to something, we can test it." So they set up an area in the back with a few items: jackets, hats, a small bag they recovered from a park bench earlier in the week, suspected to be left by the same man. Buster sniffed around casually, then he stopped. At the duffel bag. He sat down hard, looked at me, and whined. Strickland whistled. "Well, Albie, we got something." That gave them enough to dig into surveillance footage from nearby. They caught a better glimpse of the man carrying the bag. This time, they ran it through facial recognition. It flagged an alias tied to previous fraud attempts in 3 states. They had a name now, but they still didn't have a reason. Why target a 6-year-old's birthday? Why use a cake? Why a dog? That's what we were about to find out. And somehow I knew Buster would be right there with us, leading the way. The man's name was Craig Lorman, and according to the records, he'd been bouncing around the country for the last 3 years, leaving behind a trail of stolen identities, shady businesses, and unanswered questions. He'd been arrested once in Michigan for mail fraud, but disappeared before trial. Since then, he'd reinvented himself at least 5 times under different names. And now, for some reason no one could explain, he had planted a tracking device inside a birthday cake. I stared at the printed file the detective slid across the table. Craig's mugshot stared back, face thinner, eyes dull and detached. He looked like a man who didn't belong to any one place. Or maybe didn't want to. "So, what's his deal?" I asked. "Why us?" The detective, a guy named Palmer with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow and the patience of a glacier, rubbed his temple. "We don't know yet, but the fact your dog reacted before anyone else even noticed? That's not nothing. We're digging into known associates, any patterns, but so far the only constant is him showing up in small towns with quiet neighborhoods, just like yours." I looked down at Buster, lying by my feet, his tail twitching slightly. "I think he's still out there," I said. "I think he's watching us." Palmer didn't dismiss me. That was something. Back at home, the atmosphere had changed. Jack and Denise kept Carter close, barely letting him play outside. The cameras blinked red like tiny watchful eyes. And Buster, he never let his guard down. He paced the windows. He barked at shadows. At night, he slept by Carter's bed. A few neighbors stopped by, bringing casseroles and concerned looks. Word had spread about the party, the police, the photo. Most didn't know what to say. Some offered to keep an eye out. One old man down the street, Mr. Lansing, lent us a pair of binoculars and said, "You never know who's lurking." But it was Carter who surprised me the most. One morning, he came into the kitchen where I was pouring coffee. He looked up at me and said, "Can Buster come to school with me?" I smiled. "I don't think dogs are allowed, buddy." "But what if that guy comes back? Buster can protect us. I knelt down. He already did. He'll keep doing it too. Just not in the classroom, okay? Carter nodded slowly, then hugged Buster around the neck. I decided to take some time off work. My boss understood, especially once the local news picked up the story. They didn't use Carter's name, thank goodness, but they mentioned the party, the cake, the device, and the dog who saved the day. Local hero pup sniffs out trouble at birthday bash. I didn't tell Buster about the article, but I gave him an extra treat that night. A few days later, Palmer called. We might have something. I met him outside a quiet, shuttered property 10 miles from town. It had once been a dry cleaning business, now abandoned. Palmer said a tip came in about someone matching Craig's description being seen near the building. We stood there with Officer Strickland and his own canine, Jasper, a sleek Belgian Malinois. Buster sat beside me, ears up, every muscle alert. You sure you want to bring him? Palmer asked. It could be dangerous. He'll stay back, but if he reacts to anything... Strickland nodded. Let's go. They moved through the building cautiously. It was a mess inside. Broken tiles, dust, half-ripped wiring. But Buster didn't move a paw, not until we passed an old metal cabinet near the back. Then he growled. Not loud, but firm. Deliberate. Jasper, Strickland's dog, perked up too. Palmer opened the cabinet slowly. Inside was a box. A plain cardboard box sealed with duct tape. We all stepped back. Palmer called it in. A bomb squad came out, even though no wires or devices were visible. When they finally cleared it, they opened the box. Inside were dozens of small electronics, wires, chips, and at the bottom, a stack of photos. Photos of children, neighborhood kids, parks, schoolyards, and one photo of Carter at the park, holding Buster's leash. My stomach turned. I stepped away, took deep breaths. Buster pressed close, head against my thigh. Palmer looked grim. This is deeper than just fraud. Back at the station, they combed through everything. The electronics were traced to stolen shipments. The photos were printed on cheap paper, taken from a distance. The theory now was that Craig had been casing neighborhoods, maybe for abduction, maybe something worse. But something about Carter's party had made him act. And Buster had ruined the plan. We were told to stay on high alert. Patrols increased. Palmer said the feds might get involved. And Buster became a local celebrity. The local paper did a follow-up. People dropped by with treats. The school invited Buster for a short Hero Day visit, which we cleared with administration. Carter beamed the whole time. But I couldn't relax. One evening, while walking Buster near the old train tracks, he stopped. His ears went back. He sniffed the air. I followed his gaze. A figure stood just beyond the trees, too far to see clearly. When I moved forward, they vanished. Buster barked once, a sharp, warning cry. The next morning, I found a note under my windshield wiper. It said, "Next time, I won't miss." I took it straight to Palmer. That triggered a full investigation. They swept the area, searched abandoned lots, warned nearby towns. But Craig was slippery. No fingerprints on the note, no solid leads. Days passed, then a week. No more sightings, no more notes, just the tension, sitting in my chest like a stone. Then Denise came to me one night. Do you think he picked Carter for a reason? I didn't know how to answer, but I had a theory, and I hated it. Maybe Craig didn't know who Carter was. Maybe he just saw an open yard, a happy family, a child with a dog. Maybe he didn't plan to fail. But he did. Because of Buster. Whatever was coming next, I needed to be ready. And Buster? He already was. The police assigned a cruiser to circle our block twice a day after the note. It wasn't enough to make anyone feel safe, but it was better than nothing. We'd lived in this town for 10 years without ever thinking about locks or cameras. Now every creak in the floor made us jump. Buster never let up. If anything, his patrols inside the house got stricter. He'd move from window to window, lie down for exactly 20 minutes, then pace again. When Jack tried to bring him upstairs to sleep in the guest room, Buster barked until he was let back down. Carter didn't seem to mind. He slept better with his shaggy guardian curled at the foot of his bed. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard Buster growl, a slow, low rumble. I got up and followed the sound to the kitchen. Buster stood at the sliding glass door, tail rigid. I flipped on the backyard light. Nothing. But Buster kept staring. I opened the door just a crack, enough to hear. That's when I picked it up. Footsteps, fast and uneven, fading into the distance. I called Palmer again. He came with 2 officers and swept the yard. They found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches. But I knew what I heard. And Buster definitely knew what he smelled. The next day, Palmer called me into the station. "We think Craig's been targeting neighborhoods with active foster or adoption cases," he said. "You mentioned Carter was adopted, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, but that's not public information. It could have been accessed, through the state database, or by someone who knew the family." I didn't like where this was going. Palmer leaned forward. "You need to think back. Any workers, visitors, even neighbors from around the time Carter joined your family who seemed off?" There was a pause. Then it clicked. "There was a guy who came by to install the new mailbox. Said he was contracted through the county after some theft reports. Wore a badge and had a tool belt. Talked too much. Asked a lot of questions about Carter. I remember because Denise got mad at me for telling him Carter liked dinosaurs." Palmer's brow furrowed. "You got a name?" "No, but he had a scar under his right ear, and a lanyard that said LES on it." Palmer wrote it down. "We'll look into it. You might have just given us something." That afternoon, I told Denise. She went pale again. "That's him. That's the guy I saw walking away after dropping the cake. He looked shorter in the video, but that's him." Buster watched us from the hallway, ears flicking. 3 nights later, a second note arrived. Tucked in our mailbox this time. "You shouldn't have remembered." That same night, one of the security cameras caught movement in the alley behind our fence. Not a person this time, a bag. Thrown over. It landed with a soft thud. I called Palmer before even touching it. They came out, scanned it, carefully opened it. Inside were photos. Not of Carter this time, but of Buster. Dozens of them. At the park, in the front yard, sleeping on the porch. One photo, in particular, stood out. It was Buster lying next to Carter's bed, taken from a window behind the bushes. That one nearly brought Jack to tears. Palmer took the photos. "He's not just angry Buster ruined the plan, he's obsessed now. Fixated." Buster, as if on cue, growled at the front door, and then lay down again. I started sleeping in a chair next to the window. Not because I thought I'd see anything, but because Buster always watched that window, and I figured if he wasn't going to sleep properly, neither was I. A week passed. Palmer tracked down the LES company. It had never existed. Just a fake logo printed on a cheap badge. They found a similar badge in a dumpster outside a motel 20 miles away. Craig had been there. They were close. Then Carter got sick. Just a fever at first, then chills, coughing. He stayed home from school for 3 days. We didn't think much of it until Denise found a small puncture on his arm. She thought it might have been a bug bite. Buster didn't agree. He sniffed at the sheets, barked at Carter's pillow, then stood in the corner of the room, whining. Jack and I tore the room apart. Under Carter's bed, behind the headboard, taped to the wood. We found it, a small black object, like a pen, smooth, plastic. We called Palmer again. His team arrived within 30 minutes. They scanned it and found it emitted a faint signal. Tracking again, but also something else, a scent lure, used in wildlife tagging to attract certain animals, or in rare cases, disorient guard dogs. Buster sniffed at it and immediately sneezed, backing away. His eyes watered. Someone had been in our house. Denise broke down. Carter was too tired to understand. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Buster. The next day, Palmer said, "We're moving forward with a warrant. We've got an old property linked to Craig. Middle of nowhere. You're not coming. But we'll bring Jasper." I nodded. "Just get him." They left before dawn. By 3 p.m., Palmer called. They'd found the place, empty, but full of evidence. Maps, pictures, lists of kids, surveillance notes, notebooks full of strange rants about clean slates and finding the pure. It was worse than they thought. He'd been watching not just Carter, but several other kids in the county. And every time he failed, he focused more on Buster. The next day, someone left a bone on our porch. It looked normal, until I saw the name Buster written on a scrap of paper taped to it. I lost it. I drove straight to the station and demanded protection. Palmer listened. They moved us to a safe location for 2 nights. An officer stayed with us. Buster stuck to Carter like glue. But something changed during that stay. Carter started drawing again. He made a picture of Buster standing between him and a shadowy figure with red eyes. He titled it, "My Dog is a Shield." It broke me. After we returned home, I knew we couldn't keep hiding. Craig had to be stopped, and Buster would be the one to find him, whether we were ready or not. We were barely back home for 24 hours before Buster gave us our next lead. It happened on a gray Tuesday morning. Jack had gone to work. Denise was folding laundry. Carter was drawing dinosaurs with a worn blue crayon. I took Buster out front for a short walk, trying to ease his restlessness. He was sniffing more than usual, head low, tail stiff. He kept pulling toward the edge of the street, near the tall hedges where the garbage bins waited for pickup. Then he froze. I followed his gaze. Tucked just beneath one of the bins was a bag. Dark green, nylon, about the size of a shoebox. Nothing about it looked special, but Buster didn't move. He growled softly at first, then louder. I called Palmer, again. His team showed up in less than an hour. They cordoned off the area, took photos, and finally unzipped the bag. Inside were zip ties, a roll of duct tape, a black ski mask, and a small vial with a liquid they later said was likely chloroform. There was also a folded-up map. Our neighborhood, with 3 houses circled in red. Ours was one of them. Palmer didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "This was a kit, for something planned." Denise almost fainted when I told her. Later that day, Palmer updated us. Craig's real name wasn't Craig at all. It was Andrew Tobin. He'd changed identities so often the state database had trouble catching up. His original records traced back to a group home outside of St. Louis. He'd bounced through systems his whole life. Foster homes, juvenile centers, halfway houses. He'd vanished from records after turning 21. Until now. Palmer showed us a wall of evidence. Pins, photos, strings connecting dates and names. Tobin had a pattern. He inserted himself into communities under the radar, delivered packages, helped fix fences, installed mailboxes, anything that gave him access to homes and kids. And in each town, there had been disappearances. Always boys. Always 6 to 8 years old. Until now, no connection had been made because he never left a signature. No ransom, no threats, just vanished children and cold cases. But something had changed with Carter, and Palmer thought Buster was the reason. The dog threw him off his rhythm, Palmer said. He didn't plan for resistance, especially not from something he saw as a pet. That same night, the doorbell rang. We weren't expecting anyone. I checked the cameras. No one there, just a box on the porch. Palmer's team came again. They scanned it, x-rayed it, and finally opened it. It was filled with shredded newspaper and a single note. "You picked the wrong mutt." The next day, we left town. Temporarily, at least. Palmer had us relocated to a secure cabin 2 counties over. Unlisted address, guarded perimeter. It wasn't a military bunker, but it was the safest option we had. Buster adjusted quickly. He sniffed every corner of the cabin, then claimed a spot by the front door. He rarely left it. Carter, surprisingly, bounced back the fastest. He liked the woods, the quiet. He played with sticks and drew pictures in the dirt. Denise and Jack stayed tense. We all did. Then came the call. Palmer's voice was sharp. "We found Tobin." He'd been seen breaking into a shed 3 towns south. A retired teacher scared him off and got a partial plate. They tracked it to a rental car under a fake name, again, but this time they followed the trail. It led to a cabin, not unlike ours. When they raided it, Tobin was gone. But he left behind a notebook. It mentioned Carter, by name, and Buster. "He writes about the dog like it's a demon," Palmer said. "Like it ruined everything." There was also a page with stick drawings. Childish, erratic. One was a boy with a dog beside him. Both were circled over and over again in red pen. That night, I couldn't sleep. Buster didn't either. He kept sniffing under the cabin door. Around 3 a.m., he barked. Once. Loud. I jumped up and looked through the window. Nothing. Then the generator cut out. The lights died. Carter screamed. Denise clutched him while Jack grabbed the emergency flashlight. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed. Buster didn't wait. He sprinted toward the back door. Then we heard it. Wood creaking. Someone moving. I called Palmer. No answer. We huddled near the couch, waiting. Then a flash of light outside. A flare, followed by 3 loud knocks. Palmer. His voice came clear. "It's us. It's safe." They'd been tracking Tobin's signal. He had a burner phone. It pinged within 5 miles. They came to check. We told them about the power. Palmer looked grim. "He's close. Closer than we thought." They set up motion detectors around the cabin. Increased security. Still, I felt like a net was closing in. 2 days later, one of the detectors went off. Back of the property. Buster went rigid. Palmer's team searched but found no one. But they found a footprint. Barefoot. Size 11. And next to it, another bone. Smaller this time. Burnt at the tip. With a ribbon tied around it. Buster growled for an hour. We stayed inside. But I knew it couldn't last. He was testing us. Probing for weakness. Looking for his opening. And he wouldn't stop until he found it. But Buster was watching. And he never missed a thing. The forest behind the cabin became a place we avoided. Every branch that snapped, every gust of wind that rustled the trees sounded like footsteps. The patrols around our property tripled. Denise stopped going out to the porch even during the day. Jack kept a tire iron beside him at all times. I kept waking up in the middle of the night with Buster already sitting at the window, nose pressed to the glass, his entire body quiet but coiled. Carter drew less. He started sleeping in the big bed with Denise and Jack. When I brought it up, Jack just shook his head and said, "It's what he needs right now." Palmer stayed in touch every day. He updated us each time they got a hit. A gas station camera caught someone matching Tobin's description filling a gas can just 10 miles away. Another ping from his burner phone showed up near a school, then vanished. The worst part wasn't the fear. It was the waiting. Knowing he was nearby, always one step ahead. But Buster knew. He was tuned in to something deeper than noise or scent. He was locked on. Every hour he stared out the window, every time he barked at nothing, every restless lap around the perimeter. He was warning us. He was preparing. I started taking notes of Buster's behavior. The time he stiffened, the spot he sat in the longest, the direction he barked. It seemed random at first, until I realized it wasn't. Buster spent the most time watching the east edge of the woods, where the old fence line had long since fallen and thick brush had grown in. I followed him out there one morning. He kept his head low, tail rigid. We didn't go far, just enough to reach the trees. Then I saw it, a piece of twine strung low between two branches, tied with a single blue tag. I crouched and found more. A grid of sorts, not enough to trip someone, just enough to mark a path. Buster sniffed, barked once, then turned and ran back to the cabin. I flagged Palmer. When he arrived, they searched the woods. Half a mile in, they found a dugout, fresh, shallow, lined with canvas, a makeshift hideout, cigarette butts, a can of tuna, a stack of magazines, a worn-out blanket, and one photograph. Of Carter, taken just days earlier at the cabin porch. They bagged it all. Palmer called in extra personnel. They had drones flying overhead. Still, Tobin vanished again. But the tension never left. Buster started sleeping even less. He hardly ate. His world narrowed to guarding Carter. He wouldn't even let the officers get near him unless Carter was in plain sight. Then something changed. Carter woke up from a nap one afternoon, sweaty and dazed. Denise checked him and found a thin welt across his forearm. It hadn't been there that morning. Buster went ballistic. He sniffed the sheets, the windowsill, then ran to the back door and barked nonstop. Palmer reviewed every second of camera footage. Nothing. But something had happened. That night, Carter tossed and turned. I sat in the hallway outside his door. Buster lay beside me, perfectly still, ears twitching every few seconds. Around 3:45 a.m., he stood up. No bark, just stood, looked at me, then at the back window. I followed. Out the window, I saw it, just barely. A shadow, not moving like the trees, lower to the ground, then another. 2 figures, creeping. I grabbed the emergency radio and called it in. Palmer's voice came back instantly. "Stay inside side, Fuzz. Backup is 5 minutes out." Buster didn't wait. He ran to the door. He pawed it, whined, looked at me. I opened it. He took off like a rocket. I ran out after him, heart pounding. From the corner of my eye, I saw one of the shadows bolt. A man in dark clothing, sprinting for the trees. Buster veered and went straight for him. There was a scuffle, then a yelp. I ran faster, shouted his name. Then I heard a scream. When I got there, Buster was standing over the man, bloody arm, face scratched, eyes wild. He wasn't Tobin. He was a decoy, a drifter, paid to make a distraction. Palmer arrived seconds later. While they cuffed the man, another alert came through. Motion detected, front of the cabin. Tobin had used the chaos to circle back. I ran. My chest felt like it would explode, but Buster passed me, flying like lightning. He knew where to go. By the time we reached the front, Tobin was halfway through the window. Denise screamed. Carter backed away, crying. Then Buster hit him, straight into the window frame. The crash was so loud I thought the glass would shatter. Tobin tried to grab Buster by the neck, but the dog twisted, teeth clamping down on his arm. I pulled Carter away. Jack charged in with the tire iron. Tobin tried to run but staggered, bleeding heavily. Then the officers tackled him from behind. He fought like a man possessed, screaming nonsense, clawing at the dirt. Palmer tased him. Finally, it was over. The quiet after was suffocating. Carter was safe. Buster was scratched and bruised but alive. Tobin was in custody, and yet none of us could relax. Because after everything, the image that stayed with me most was Buster, standing in that broken frame, chest heaving, eyes locked on Carter, as if daring the world to try again. The week after Tobin's capture was a blur of interviews, paperwork, and doctors. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Local reporters, state investigators, even 2 federal agents who flew in from D.C. to assess the full scope of what Tobin had been planning. But through it all, Buster never left Carter's side. They checked Tobin into a high-security medical facility after he attempted to bite one of the officers who transported him. Palmer said the man was too far gone to make any real sense. His notebooks were full of ramblings, some about purity, others about shadows and correcting the corrupted. It didn't matter how disturbing the content was. The details made it clear. Carter had been his final target. But Buster had ended that plan. Back at the cabin, we tried to go back to some version of normal. Palmer suggested we stay put a little longer. There was paperwork to finish and risk assessments to complete. Denise didn't argue. Neither did Jack. Even Carter seemed relieved to stay somewhere that didn't remind him of cake frosting and flashing red lights. But Buster was tired. Not in the way old dogs get. Not the slow, achy kind of tired. This was something deeper. The kind of exhaustion that clings to you even after a full night's sleep. He was still alert, still aware, but his movements were slower. When he rested, he sank deeper into the floor, sighing like he carried weight only he could feel. I brought him to the vet. Dr. Clara Baker ran tests, checked vitals, listened to his chest. "He's healthy," she said. "But dogs like Buster, dogs who bond this deeply, who take on this much, they burn through their reserves. Emotionally. He's been in full protection mode for weeks. He's safe now, and he knows it. But his body hasn't caught up yet." When I told Carter, he nodded solemnly and patted Buster gently. "He's a hero. Even heroes need naps." Later that day, Palmer visited. He brought a box of files under his arm, set them on the table, and looked around. "I know you want to move on," he said, "but I need to ask for your help." Jack tensed. "We've done everything we could." Palmer held up a hand. "I'm not asking for more statements. I want to use Buster." "What?" Denise's voice was sharp, protective. "He's the reason Tobin slipped up. The reason Carter's alive. I've been reviewing every detail, and I think Buster picked up on patterns before we even knew they were patterns. He responded to locations, scents, maybe even routines. We've found more of Tobin's hideouts, 10 across 4 states. Some had pictures of Buster taped to the walls. This dog, he wasn't just a problem to Tobin. He was the obstacle, I looked at Buster, lying near Carter's feet, head resting on his paws. "What do you want him to do?" I asked. "There are 2 sites we haven't been able to link yet," Palmer said. "One in Indiana, one outside Pittsburgh. We think they were active at some point, but we don't know if they're safe houses, storage, or worse. If Buster responds, it could help us shut this case for good." Denise hesitated. "And what if he doesn't want to go?" Palmer looked at her gently. "Then we don't go." We talked about it as a family. Jack leaned toward going. He wanted this chapter closed. Denise worried it would re-traumatize Carter, but Carter said something I didn't expect. "Buster doesn't want other kids to get hurt. Right, boy?" Buster lifted his head. The next morning, we drove to the Indiana site. It was a shuttered gas station on a rural road, half swallowed by weeds. The windows were boarded, the door half hanging from its hinges. Palmer met us there with his team. "Let's just observe," he said. "No pushing." We stepped out. Buster sniffed the air, his head tilted. Then he barked. Once. He pulled toward the far side of the lot, toward an old dumpster. Palmer followed. They pried open the rusted lid. Inside were bags of clothing, a stack of child-sized shoes, and a burned folder containing partially legible names. 2 were already listed as missing. It was enough. They called in the rest of the team, collected the evidence, thanked Buster like he was part of the task force. Carter clapped for him. Denise cried quietly in the car. We stayed in a motel that night. Buster slept better. Deeper, no pacing. Then came Pittsburgh. The site was a mobile home, parked in the woods, miles off any real road. Whoever had used it last tried to burn it down. The damage wasn't complete. Palmer's team had waited, unsure whether to proceed. Buster sniffed once, then whined. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He walked in slowly, nose to the floor. Inside, he stopped at the corner of the room. Dug at the charred flooring. They pulled up the wood. Underneath were 5 ID tags. Plastic. Laminated. Photos of children. None were Carter. 2 had been presumed runaways. The other 3 weren't in any database. Palmer was quiet for a long time. He turned to Buster. "You just opened 5 new cases." We drove home with heavy hearts. Buster rested his head on Carter's lap. Carter whispered to him the whole ride back. Stories about dinosaurs, dreams, made-up songs. And through it all, Buster listened. 3 days later, we were back at the cabin. Palmer said we could leave soon. The case had shifted to a new phase, evidence analysis, case reclassification. But the worst was behind us. Or so we thought. That night, Buster barked again. This time, it wasn't sharp. It was confused. Uneasy. I followed him outside. There, in the driveway, was a package. Brown paper, no label, no return address. I called Palmer. They arrived in 20 minutes. Inside the box was a note. "You stopped one of us, but there are more." Palmer read it twice, then turned to me. "We're not done, not even close." Buster stood beside me, not barking, just watching. Still waiting. Still ready. Palmer didn't speak for a long time after reading the note. He just stood there, fingers clenching and unclenching around the paper like he was trying to squeeze meaning out of it. The sun was barely rising, casting a weak orange light over the cabin porch. Carter and Denise were still asleep. Jack was inside making coffee without saying a word. Buster sat at my feet, eyes locked on Palmer's boots. Finally, Palmer sighed. This changes everything." I didn't need to ask what he meant. We'd all been hoping that Tobin was a sick anomaly, a lone predator, unhinged and obsessed. But this meant Tobin was part of something larger, something organized. And if there were more of them, then everything we'd done, all the close calls, all the wounds and victories, they weren't an ending. They were a beginning. Palmer had the note rushed to the lab. They found no fingerprints, no unusual fibers. But the paper was traced to a printing warehouse in Kansas, one that had reported a theft of supplies just 2 weeks ago. A coincidence, maybe, but nobody was treating it like one. The FBI took more interest after that. Palmer looped in Agent Samuels, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a voice that never changed tone. She arrived within 24 hours, accompanied by a forensics team, 2 analysts, and a guy named Donnelly, who seemed to remember every face he'd ever seen. They set up in the cabin's den with laptops, files, and a corkboard covered in photos and timelines. It looked like something out of a crime show. Carter wasn't allowed in that room. Neither was Buster. But Buster kept sitting right outside the door, ears up, alert. Agent Samuels was skeptical about using a dog as a lead at first. That changed after she reviewed the footage of Buster sniffing out the path markers near the gas station. She asked to meet him personally. When Buster walked in and immediately sat in front of her with a focused gaze, she blinked and nodded once. "He's not just a pet," she said. "He's a sensor." Buster huffed, as if agreeing. That week was a whirlwind. Every thread from Tobin's life was unraveled. Emails, burner phones, tax records under aliases, even a note he'd scribbled to himself on a motel napkin. A few clues pointed to another town, a small place in Ohio called Leeville. The FBI asked if we'd be willing to go. Denise said no. Jack hesitated. Carter surprised everyone. "If Buster goes, I go." We talked about it for hours, but in the end we agreed. We couldn't turn our backs on this. We'd come too far. And if there really were more out there, hiding in the cracks of small-town life, then we weren't just running from them, we were helping them by doing nothing. So we packed again. The FBI handled the transport. We were set up in a safe house just outside Leeville, a converted barn on a property owned by a retired marshal who still kept a shotgun behind his front door. Buster explored the perimeter like it was routine. He seemed energized again, like his purpose had returned with full force. Leeville was quiet. Too quiet. Palmer said the town had only one missing child report in the last 10 years, but their records were a mess. Files misplaced. People never followed up. That one case was never solved. We met with the local sheriff, a gray-haired man named Rogers, who looked like he'd seen everything twice. He didn't like the FBI on his turf. But once he heard the details, once he saw the box of evidence Palmer brought, he changed his tune. "That kid disappeared on a Wednesday," Rogers said. "No signs of forced entry. Left his bike in the yard. Never showed up to school." He handed over the file. The boy's name was Eli Grant, 7 years old. Brown hair, green eyes. The photo was grainy but clear enough. I looked at Buster. He looked back at me. We visited the old Grant house the next day. The family had moved out years ago. It sat empty now, windows boarded, yard wild with weeds. But Buster led us around back, sniffed the ground, whined, then barked, loud and clear. Palmer called in the team. They uncovered a scrap of fabric wedged between 2 fence boards, faded, stained, but unmistakably part of a child's jacket. The FBI ran it for DNA. A partial match to Eli. That night, Buster paced. Not with anxiety, but with intent. Every few minutes he would stop, sit by Carter's bed, then resume. The next morning, we walked him through downtown Leeville. He reacted near the library, then again near the feed store. Agent Samuels triangulated the spots. They formed a rough triangle around an empty warehouse near the train tracks. Palmer frowned. It was owned by a logistics company. Went bankrupt 2 years ago. We drove there at noon, sun high, birds quiet. The warehouse was locked, but not alarmed. The FBI brought bolt cutters. Inside, the place smelled of mildew and rust, but Buster pulled forward. He sniffed the floor, barked once, then ran toward a pile of collapsed shelving. Underneath was a trap door. We waited for clearance before opening it. Inside was a crawl space, narrow, dirt floor, and a bundle of old blankets. Underneath them, toys, plastic figures, shoes, a faded photograph of a child, Eli. And one more thing. A notebook, with pages scribbled in the same style as Tobin's, same twisted phrases, same symbols, but a different name. Andrew Tobin hadn't acted alone. Palmer turned to Samuels. "We've got a network." Samuels didn't blink. "We tear it out root by root." Outside, Carter sat quietly on the curb. Buster lay beside him, chin on his paws. I watched them, knowing something huge had shifted again. This wasn't about us anymore. It was about the ones still out there. And Buster had just opened the next door. The name in the notebook was Marcus Vell. He wasn't a ghost like Tobin. He had records, arrests, psychiatric evaluations. He'd served time in 2 states, released on technicalities both times. And for the last 6 months, according to the address listed on an expired state ID, he'd been living less than an hour outside Leeville in a town called Hemmer Creek. Palmer called in a surveillance team immediately. They sent in unmarked vehicles, did a quiet drive-by of the listed address, a weather-beaten trailer sitting on the edge of a dried creek bed. No lights, no movement. The mailbox leaned at an awkward angle, rusted nearly through, but a closer look revealed fresh tire marks leading away from the gravel driveway. "Vell's not home?" Palmer said, looking over the photos. "But he was, probably within the last 24 hours. The team moved fast. A warrant was issued. The trailer was searched that same afternoon while we waited at the safe house. Carter played quietly with a deck of cards on the living room floor while Buster lay beside him, tail thumping softly whenever Carter talked. When Palmer called that evening, his voice was tense. They found something. The trailer was a mess, clothes everywhere, dishes stacked high. But what made everyone go still was the closet. Behind a false panel, the team uncovered photos, dozens pinned to the wall. Children, playgrounds, school buses, public parks, and Buster. 5 clear photos of Buster, sitting by our front porch, watching Carter from the sidewalk. One image, taken just a week ago, showed Buster standing beside Palmer's car, staring into the camera. "He's tracking the dog now," Samuel said later. "Not just the kid." When Palmer told us, Denise had to sit down. Jack stood frozen, gripping the back of a kitchen chair until his knuckles went white. Carter looked up from his cards and said, "Does that mean Buster scared him too?" "Yes," I said. "He's scared of Buster." That night, Buster didn't pace. He stood in front of the door and didn't move for hours. It was like he sensed what we'd found, like he knew this wasn't just another target. This was personal. The FBI ran the new data through their system. Connections started to emerge. Tobin and Vell had shared a halfway house a decade ago. Vel had been present at a foster care conference in Arkansas the same year 2 boys vanished from a local shelter. And buried in a digital archive, they found a mention of a group called The Hand, rumored to be an underground ring focused on child abductions, with suspected links across multiple states. It had never been proven. Until now. Samuels ordered every active agent in the region to pull old cases with similarities. Dozens came up. Most had long been closed. Many were labeled as runaways. But with the new context, patterns began to form. Buster's role shifted from companion to operative. Everywhere we went, agents followed his lead. His behavior was logged, analyzed, mapped. He wasn't just sniffing for danger anymore. He was drawing lines between unseen threats. The analysts called it behavioral triangulation. Samuels called it instinct. Buster just called it duty. We traveled again. This time to Oak Hill, a rural town Vel had passed through 3 months prior. There had been no official incidents, but local chatter spoke of a strange man who asked about children at the farmer's market, who drove a silver sedan with no plates. We pulled into Oak Hill just after noon. Buster sat tall in the back of the vehicle, scanning the streets like he knew what to look for. He didn't bark. Not at first. But when we passed an old barn with a sun-faded sign reading, Miller's Grain, he growled low in his throat. We stopped. Palmer's team swept the barn. It looked abandoned, dust-covered shelves, broken doors, mouse droppings in the corners, but Buster led us to the back, where a trap door lay beneath a rolled-up rug. It opened with a creak. Inside was a tunnel. Shallow. Earth floor. Less than 20 feet long. At the end of the tunnel, the team found a room. Square. Lined with plywood. And inside, more photos. Children. Schools. One image of Carter. One image of another boy. Brown hair, striped shirt, missing since 2017. And in the center of the room, a single metal chair, chained to the floor. That night, no one slept. Palmer called it the first confirmed holding site. We returned to the safe house, and Buster stayed close to Carter. Closer than ever. It was like something inside him had shifted. A deeper understanding of the enemy. He barked less, but when he did, it was sharper, more focused. Samuels put it bluntly. We are dealing with a network of individuals trained to hide in plain sight. Buster is our tracker, our mirror. When he stops trusting a place, neither should we. Then the next message came. Left on the safe house porch in the early hours. 3 words, cut out from a magazine and glued to cardboard. Not just him. We all stared at it. Who? Denise asked. Who else are they after? Palmer answered quietly. They mean Buster. Carter cried that night. Not for himself. For Buster. He's my best friend, he whispered. Why would they want to hurt my best friend? None of us had an answer. But we knew one thing. Whatever came next, Buster was ready, and we'd follow wherever he led. By morning, the safe house was crawling with agents. Samuels ordered round-the-clock surveillance and reinforced perimeter fencing. Everyone was on edge, and every sound outside the windows turned heads. Carter stayed in the living room, curled against the cushions with a blanket, while Buster sat on alert at the threshold between rooms, a quiet guardian with ears twitching at every creak. Agent Donnelly was the first to bring it up. They're escalating, he said, as he laid out a fresh batch of files on the dining table. "They're not just watching now. They're provoking." That message was a threat, not just to you, but to the dog. Samuels frowned. "And that means they're close to desperate," Palmer chimed in. "Or it means Buster's made himself their greatest threat." We all looked at him then. At this dog, who'd once just been our family's gentle companion. The same one who used to chase squirrels and hide under the porch during fireworks. Now, Buster was at the center of a manhunt. They fitted him with a new collar, military grade, GPS tracked, equipped with a discreet camera and a panic alert that would ping headquarters if activated. Samuels insisted. "He's our lead. We protect him like one." Later that day, we reviewed old security footage from the safe house perimeter. Samuels had analysts combing every frame. And there it was. At 3:17 a.m., a figure moved across the south fence line. Just for a second. No clear face, no obvious intent, but the movement was purposeful. Deliberate. They were testing us again. Buster had growled that night. Just once. Just long enough to wake me up. They never should have underestimated that. The next morning, Palmer gathered us in the kitchen. "We've isolated a warehouse," he said, "in Westmark. It's been leased under different shell companies for the last year. One of Vel's burner phones pinged nearby 6 weeks ago." Samuels added, "We think it's a coordination site, possibly a hub. We're going in." Jack straightened. "Do you need us there?" Palmer nodded slowly. "We need Buster." We rode in separate SUVs. Blacked out. Quiet. Even Carter understood the weight of what we were doing. He didn't complain, didn't ask questions. He just sat with Buster, resting a hand on the dog's back, like it was the only stable thing in the world. When we arrived, the warehouse looked abandoned. Corrugated siding, rust along the roofline, weeds pushing up through cracked asphalt. But Buster was alert the moment we stepped out. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just moved like he already knew. Palmer signaled to the entry team. They breached the door. Inside, it was empty. Or so it seemed. But Buster pulled to the right, toward a wall lined with old lockers. He sat, then barked. Once. The agents opened them one by one. Inside one, bags of clothing, children's shoes, a black ledger with dozens of names and dates. Inside another, a cot, stained. Duct tape, a roll of wire, and a pack of disposable cameras. Samuel stood still, jaw clenched. "We've got enough for 10 arrests with this alone." But it wasn't over. In a locked filing cabinet, they found a blueprint of a neighborhood, not ours, a different one. Palmer laid it on the hood of the car. "This is Greenville, 2 hours east." There were circles, 5 of them, all homes with children between 6 and 8 years old. They were planning another sweep. That night, we stayed in a secure facility run by the Bureau. Concrete walls, cameras in every hallway. Denise barely slept. Carter curled up on a cot with Buster lying half on top of him. The next morning, Buster stood at the door and wouldn't budge. He was staring at a bag, one of the agent's duffel bags. Innocuous. But when Samuels asked who it belonged to, no one answered. It wasn't anyone's. Inside was a folded jacket. Under the jacket, a phone. And on the phone, a live tracking app, monitoring our GPS tags. One of them had planted it, or someone got in. Samuels ordered a sweep. Everyone was checked. Backgrounds rerun. But the phone was burner tier. Untraceable. Inside access, Palmer said. "They're watching our watchers." We were moved again. A new location. Undisclosed. Still, Buster didn't relax. He paced more, watched longer, ate less. Until the call came. A local in Greenville spotted a suspicious vehicle idling near one of the circled homes from the blueprint. The car sped off before anyone could get a plate, but the homeowner managed to snap a photo. When the image came through, my blood went cold. Tied to the roof of the car, just barely visible, was a child's backpack. Palmer and Samuels launched the operation immediately. We joined, only because Buster refused to be separated from Carter. They let us ride in the back vehicle. Buster was vibrating with energy the whole ride. Eyes sharp, body tense. We arrived at the neighborhood just before dusk. The house in question was a rental, recently signed under a fake name that matched one of Vel's past aliases. Agents surrounded it. No movement. Then Buster growled. Not at the house, at the yard next door. He lunged for the fence, barking, pulling, scratching. Palmer ordered a split. 2 teams. One stayed, one followed Buster. They entered the side yard. Then the cellar door flew open. A man bolted, but Buster was faster. He tackled him mid-stride. The man screamed, twisted, tried to throw him off. He failed. Agents piled on. Vel. It was Vel. And inside the cellar, they found the girl. 7 years old, shivering, alive. And that's when I realized something. Buster hadn't just followed scent. He had known. He had known there was still someone to save. He didn't stop moving until she was safe in the arms of the agents. Then he lay down. Not tired. Just still. Like he knew the fight wasn't over yet. But for this one moment, someone had been saved. Because of him. The following morning, the sun broke through the clouds like it hadn't in weeks. It didn't warm everything instantly. There was still a heaviness in the air. But it shone down on the safe house like it had finally earned a rest. Carter was the first to wake. He didn't say anything, just climbed off the cot and knelt beside Buster, running a hand over his head gently. Buster's eyes opened slowly. He gave Carter a short huff and rested his chin on the boy's knee. Outside, the Bureau's team was buzzing with activity. The girl rescued from Vel's cellar had been identified as Ellie Sandler, missing for over 6 months. Her parents had flown in overnight. The reunion had been emotional and overwhelming, a reminder to everyone why the search had mattered. Palmer had watched from a distance, his arms crossed, eyes distant. Samuel stood beside him quietly. We were packing up. Denise and Jack folded blankets, helped Carter into a fresh shirt, gathered the few things we'd brought. I filled out paperwork with Agent Donnelly in the main office, signing off on our official withdrawal from the field. Samuels wanted us gone before the next phase began. "You've done more than enough," she said. But it wasn't just us they were talking about. It was Buster. He lay on the porch now, tail stretched out behind him, watching the forest beyond the fence with tired eyes. Not wary, not afraid, just watchful, present. Samuels crouched beside him and placed her badge gently on the deck. "If we gave medals to dogs, you'd get every one of them." Palmer stepped out to say goodbye. He handed me a small folder. Inside, photos from the raids, copies of recovered files, a thank you note from Ellie's family, and one final document. "Official recognition," he said. "He's been added to our internal list of field operatives. First non-human entry." I blinked at the words. "He's just a dog." Palmer shook his head. "He's more than that, and we both know it." We left that afternoon. The drive back to our hometown was silent for long stretches. Carter leaned against the car window with Buster curled at his side. Denise held Jack's hand. I drove without turning on the radio. No distractions, just the road home. When we pulled into our driveway, the house looked the same. Lawn a little overgrown, a few weeds in the cracks of the walkway. The porch swing creaked lazily in the wind. But nothing was the same. We were different. All of us. Neighbors came by that evening, cautiously at first. Some brought meals, others asked questions. We didn't have many answers to give, and most of the story would never be public. But they didn't come for details. They came to see Buster. They brought treats, scratched behind his ears, called him a hero. Carter just smiled. He always was. Over the next few days, things settled. Jack went back to work. Denise started volunteering at a local shelter. Carter returned to school, and his teacher called the second day to say he'd written a poem titled, "The Dog Who Saved the Whole World." It made me cry in the kitchen. Buster slept more now. He didn't patrol the windows as much, didn't growl at the mailman, or sniff every blade of grass in the yard. But when Carter stepped outside, Buster still followed. Quietly. Steadily. He didn't need to be told. One morning, weeks later, I took Buster for a walk. Just the two of us. The neighborhood was waking up. Sprinklers ticked on, birds chirped, someone's garage door rattled open. We walked slowly, no destination in mind. Halfway around the block, a kid on a scooter zoomed past, wobbling at the turn. Buster tensed, but didn't bark. He just looked at me, then kept walking. He knew he didn't have to save the world every time someone lost their balance, but he'd be ready if it ever happened again. That night, Carter asked if Buster could sleep in his bed again. Denise looked at me. "He never really stopped," I said. We all laughed. Sometime after midnight, I got up for water. As I passed Carter's room, I peeked inside. Moonlight spilled through the window, catching the soft curve of Carter's cheek as he slept. Buster lay beside him. His eyes were closed. But I swear I saw his ear twitch. Still listening. Still here. Still ours. And I knew then, no matter how far the darkness tried to reach, no matter how close danger ever came again, our boy had a shadow by his side who would never leave. Not because he had to, because he wanted to, because he chose us, and we chose him.